Welcome into UGA Football Live with JC Shelton, where the dogs come to talk. All right, guys, welcome in UGA Football Live with JC Shelton. Got a big matchup to talk about here. I'm joined by my friend and my partner this season, former Georgia tight end Arthur Lynch. How are you doing, Artie?
I'm good. Ready to talk. I enjoyed a little kind of live reaction yesterday with the college football playoff. It's just kind of exciting because when that means that we're getting to the bulk of what we love most about college football, and that's kind of like end of the year rivalries, and then this kind of shakeup because there's always some weird stuff that happens in November, right? And typically it makes college football. It's what makes college football great. So I'm doing good, man. Doing good.
Yeah. And he's, if you don't know, he's referring to our live CFP reaction show that we did last night on a Tuesday. We're going to think about doing those again. I think we had some pretty good numbers there. So hopefully you guys enjoyed that. And with that note too, I want to refer back to the Hines Ward interview I did last week in Athens. It is live now. If you haven't checked that out, it's worth your time. Just a 12-minute interview with Hines, and he said a lot of great stuff, and I was very impressed with him. Let's move on. Let's quick recap here, Missouri, because we haven't really talked about it through, and I think it's worth noting when thinking about this Ole Miss team coming up in Athens here. So I'll get into this here. So 31-20 Dogs, 26 straight win, 25 straight conference wins. Close game when you really look at the numbers too, because that's what I was doing before we jumped on. Both teams had 21 first downs. Missouri 5 of 13 on third, Georgia 6 of 13 on third. So close there, right? Missouri total yards 363, Georgia had 385. And then Missouri 151 yards on the ground, Georgia 131. It's really interesting when you think about it. Georgia led this time of possession by almost 10 minutes, which when you look at the score and how close that game was, that was interesting to me because Georgia didn't gain more yards and do more with all of that time of possession. So Missouri's defense really played well in the red zone, in my opinion. And, Missouri, we talked about how they were one of the more penalized teams coming into this game. They ended up having 8 penalties. Georgia had 5. Georgia's one of the least penalized teams, which is a really good thing when you think about this late in the season, how disciplined Georgia is on that front. And that can only help you in the postseason. But really the difference here is definitely the turnovers, right? We saw those 2 interceptions by Georgia, taking advantage of Brady Cook and giving him some different looks and putting pressure on him. Georgia had 3 sacks in the game. I think that was really the difference maker when you look back. Georgia had some trouble in the red zone there. And we talked about them having issues scoring red zone touchdowns because they do get in the red zone so much with that offense. And then Peyton Woodring having to really rely on him, and he's been perfect. He's done really well. He stepped up into his role as a true freshman, but it's something to note. Now, Georgia is one of the best at least scoring in the red zone, but not touchdowns. So something to remember as well. And takeaways here, I think the stretch runs from Cody Schrader, and we talked about him briefly last week, but he really impressed me, and that was something that I'm not sure if you saw already, but that's a big takeaway from me in that stretch one for Missouri and Cody Schrader taking advantage there. That offensive line for Missouri really played well in the run sets. Like I said, those stretch runs, Cody had like 120 something yards on the ground. And Missouri, of course, 151. We don't see teams really run on Georgia like that. So it's interesting to me. I want to get your thoughts, Artie, on that game. I think we both had a bigger, at least margin of victory for Georgia in our predictions. What do you think? Give me some takeaways here from Georgia's win versus Missouri.
Yeah. I think before the game, although we like Georgia to cover the spread and win by a bigger margin, I think we both understood that Missouri, this is not the Missouri of the past 5 years, right? I think we saw what Coach Eli Drinkwitz.
Yeah.
I don't want to butcher the man's name.
That was a weird one.
Yeah, but last year he kind of got him going a little bit, and I think he's a really good coach, right? Obviously, he spent 1 year as a head coach at Appalachian State. But if anyone follows college football and has followed college football, which I imagine everyone who's watching the show does, I have a lot of respect for the head coaches that have come through Appalachian State because they know how to build. Those types of coaches are program builders. So I think you and I had a certain expectation for what Missouri was going to be like, and I didn't think we were just going to run all over them. I think you and I both said like it's probably going to be a fairly close first half, and then Georgia will probably just kind of wear them down in the second half. And to be fair, that's kind of what we did.
Yep.
I just don't think that we didn't anticipate a 9-point game. So yeah, I was a little surprised that Missouri ran the ball as well as they did. I honestly thought they were going to be throwing it around a little bit more. But what was encouraging about the game for me, watching it for me, was the fact that we didn't freak out, right? We didn't. The coaches, the players, after the game that we had at Florida, I think a lot of people's expectations were like, "Oh, we're going to blow out Missouri, we're going to go into Ole Miss, we're going to blow out Ole Miss, and so on and so forth." And I think this week was a great reminder of the type of football that is played in the SEC, right? And I say we collectively, as the University of Georgia fan base and supporters of the program, but more importantly, the team itself, they're now they are the back-to-back national champions. They're number one in the country in the AP. They're moving towards a three-peat. They're going to get every team's best shot. They just are, right? Just the way Alabama would always get every team's best shot for so many years. Georgia has kind of filled that vacuum a little bit. So I think, offensively, we put up 30-something points against a good defense in Missouri. Defensively, we held a very good offensive team in Missouri with 21 points. We didn't cover the spread per se, but overall I felt pretty confident about Georgia's performance because when things got a little bit tough, when things got a little bit close, we didn't panic, right? We're like, all right, we've been here before. Let's make adjustments at halftime. Let's pull ahead, and ultimately they won the game. So, and I think that was a great test for us, and a very good start to a pretty tough stretch of games here. Starting with Missouri, and then obviously this week with Ole Miss.
Yeah, I think it's hard to gauge the reaction from the Missouri game for me as someone who's really involved in trying to gain that, at least the interest from the fans, or what do they feel about it, what the majority of people are saying. But I haven't seen many negative things come out. I think as a fan base, we respect Missouri a lot more after their last year's performance. And then coming into this game, we expected a tough fight, and it was. And props to Missouri. They're a good team. Luther Burden went out in that game with an injury. But before that, other than the lone touchdown, it was just a great play, great throw. It was really cool to see Kamari Lassiter go from CB1 to playing star in 1 week just to take down Luther Burden and keep him in check. And he had 3 catches, 53 in that touchdown. And it kind of speaks to just the versatility of not only Kamari himself, but the other guys in that back end to take his spot and play well, communicate well, not allow big plays. Most of those yards, remember, on the ground for Missouri, So I was really impressed by that. And it was really cool to see as a defensive guy myself. I love defense, what I grew up playing and really focused on. And then seeing that, it just really was impressive to me, that secondary. And where does that come from? Kirby Smart, Will Muschamp, those guys, Fran Brown back there. They know what they're doing. And I think that really speaks to them and their strengths there, knowing how to set their players up for success in the team, at least defensively there. Carson Beck, offensively, Carson Beck didn't hurt you, right? He was efficient. Tough game, tough defense, a defense who got 3 sacks on Georgia, and Georgia leads the conference in giving up sacks. We're not used to doing that. So they gave Georgia some different looks up front and put those really reserved players that have worked into starting roles with guys out in the offensive line and give them some tough tests. So he didn't hurt you. I keep saying that. He does not hurt you. And that's what you want to see if you're thinking about your team going to the championship. Does your quarterback hurt you? Because there's a lot of quarterbacks out there that do, right? Carson isn't that guy. He hasn't been all year. So I don't expect that to change. I'm impressed with him. And I think, like you said, these tough games in South Carolina and Auburn, I think looking back at Missouri, it just builds the confidence in your team no matter what type of game it is, how much you're down, whatever. Hey, we know that, in the end, we think we're the most physical team. the most balanced team. We're going to catch up to you before 4 quarters are up. And another shout out here to Peyton Woodring, career long 48 yards, 3 of 3, hasn't missed a kick since week 3, where he missed 2 against South Carolina. And I remember that show, we were talking about it. And I was like, this might affect Georgia down the road. Sure enough, he has a lot of confidence, and Georgia has confidence in him. Kicking that 48-yarder, right? That really, it put the game away, and it made it in a 2-score game. And Missouri was going to have to do some crazy stuff to make that happen to get a win. So that was big. And when you're thinking about the postseason run, which I am, of course. And then defensively quick, 7 tackles for Samael Mondon, Jalen Walker, sophomore, 1.5 sacks there. And then Nazir Stackhouse with the rumbling and tumbling big man nose tackle interception. I mean, that's awesome, dude. I remember seeing that. I was in the stadium, and I was just so pumped for him, right? Because he nose tackles don't get any, unless you're Jordan Davis already. Nose tackles don't get anything, man. And then he gets that pick. That was awesome.
It just goes to show when you put things in perspective, like, first off, when he was running, it like didn't look normal because he's so big, right? But you realize how athletic that big man is to be able to the quickness, the hand-eye coordination, the agility, and then like the wherewithal to be like, oh, I'm toting this thing, you know what I mean? And I just think it's always a nice reminder when you see those kind of like bizarre plays. They're not bizarre, like they're skill plays, right? But then you're just like, well, this doesn't really look normal. But you're like, the fact that someone this big can do this in a game like this just goes to show how like specially gifted physically they are. You know what I mean? You're just like, oh, this isn't a normal human being. And yeah, it's a fun play. But the first thing that came to my mind is like, this is like this man's body, like this body is like, there's not many of these walking around Earth.
Yeah, like 6'4", 320. It was so funny. I saw after the game, somebody like studied the tape. It may have been Dane Young on Twitter, UJ Sports, I believe he works for.
It was probably Dane.
Yeah, a lot of good stuff from Dane. But he basically took, the yardage markers and like timed his 40, what it would be. And it was like 5'1", a 5'1", 2. I was like, that's pretty impressive. I'm not going to lie.
When he goes combine training, he'll probably break 5, right?
Yeah, it looks like it. I mean, if somebody just needs him to give him a ball, right?
Man,
go like a little pick drill and then let him run the 40. And he has that adrenaline pumping.
It's not, and again, I'm not trying to change the subject here, but it's just a reminder of like a couple of weeks ago, you and I were talking about like, I think it was like when Colorado was still going on their run a little bit, and we were just talking about like, is it sustainable? Coach Prime, this and that, and Coach Prime, Deion Sanders talked about like, what's the difference between what Colorado is right now and say like Alabama, Georgia, and when he just talked about those bodies up front, right? Those offensive, defensive linemen. If you ask anybody that's played in the SEC, obviously great quarterbacks, obviously great running backs, but you talk about those dudes up front, and you're just like different bodies, man. Christian Robinson, one of Aaron and my roommates from a college, who's now a coach at Baylor, he's like, when I'm recruiting guys, I'm looking for bodies. You know what I mean? Because like, here's like, you just can't teach like the width. You look at their hips, you look at their like ankles, their knees, their necks. It's like, you could be 300 pounds and you could be like, and there's a good 300 and a bad 300. And when I saw that dude running, I was like, all I could think about was like Christian just talking to me. He's like, that's a body right there, coach. That's a body. That's an NFL body.
Yeah.
Just
body moving, award of the week goes to Nazir.
No doubt.
Stackhouse.
No doubt.
I love it. We'll get into UGA injury updates really quick, then we'll go into Ole Miss here. Huge one here, and hits keep coming a bit. Jamon Dumas-Johnson, right, at your Butt Kiss Award preseason pick for Georgia at linebacker, going to miss some time with a fractured arm. So, something to note, and I always say this about injuries, Kirby Smart's not going to give you a thing, right? He'll start giving you more information when they're closer to being back on the field. but rarely does he give you actually substantial information. He shared no details on the timetable for him or the severity of the injury, but the only thing we have is from Chip Towers, AJC, who says he asked Jamon when he was coming off the field, and he basically said, I'm going to try to play with this. How many games does he miss? We're not sure, of course. And that from Chip was after the game. So maybe, more tests were done and it's worse than thought, or vice versa, whatever it is. But he missed the rest of the game. Good thing is for Georgia here, when we're talking about this, they have a lot of experienced guys in linebacker. Xavier Sawyer is one of them. He can play outside or inside. Expect to see him there. Jalen Walker can play outside, inside. He could see some time there. And then the freshman, Raylan Wilson, CJ Allen, they played more last week when Jamon went out. And they're two former 5-stars. Now, they are true freshmen, right? So they're going to make mistakes here and there. But they are talented. They've been in the system long enough to at least know what they're doing. From that standpoint, they've had, this many weeks of the season to get up to speed as well, and they've played snaps. It's not like they haven't played at all. So I think we'll be okay, but it's something to watch out for. Amarius Mims, he did dress, but no playing time. Could see him as soon as this week back on the field. Brock Bowers, we could see him in the next 2 weeks. This is really interesting. So I think he dresses out Saturday, Artie.
I think so too.
Kirby said he's back running. This was all last night. This is Wednesday. We're shooting this. Kirby said he's back running, at least dry land. And Marcus Rosemy-Jacksaint, reporters asked him about Brock in his press conference yesterday. And Marcus said that he heard that Brock was hitting at least 19 or 20 miles per hour in practice already. So was he in pads? What did that look like? We don't know. But I think that's at least enough to put on the uniform and play in what will probably, most likely, be his last game in Sanford Stadium. I don't see him not walking out there at least. Will he play? I think that's unlikely, but I think he dresses out. We get to see him in uniform. So that'll be nice. And then he's right on, if he's on the track for the timing we've seen with his injury from the last two guys, Lawson Lucky and Amarius Mims, who went through the same thing, he could have a chance of playing against Tennessee. That falls within the time window. But one thing we know, and I always remind people of this, what we've learned from Kirby Smart, he's not going to rush guys back, especially a guy like Brock Bowers with so much future potential beyond Athens, right? Artie, what do you think it would be like? Briefly touched on this in the live show. From a player's perspective, when you get a guy like that back in the lineup, whenever he does come back.
Yeah, I mean, the impact's immeasurable, right? Because it's hard to adequately describe the impact, both psychologically, but also the physical impact that he has, or that type of player has, on the game. And what I mean by that is he has been so clutch for so long for the Dogs, right? Coming up with big plays, coming up with those kind of end around handoffs that he does, those kind of end around reverses, and whether it be 50-50 balls that he gets, right, or big third down catches, and he's just been so dominant at the position that the entire team, and again, I don't know this personally, I don't speak to anybody that close to the team. However, just from my experience and kind of watching how the team reacts to him and how they speak about him when people are interviewed and are asked about him, like, he is just an example setter, and people look to him in a spot to make a big play. And so, I can only speak about my own experiences as a player. Like when Gurley was in the game, right, or when AJ Green was in the game, or I wasn't there for Noshawn, but when guys like that, the All-America type players, the first round type talents, dudes that that on any given snap, if the ball touches their hands, they can make a game-changing play. Like, that type of confidence gets instilled in the whole team. So the whole team's level of play raises to the standard that is set by that type of player, because there's just a natural confidence that comes with the security blanket of having a dude like that in your offense. Or it could be defensive, it could be a defensive player as well, right? Jarvis Jones is the type of guy, when Jarvis was on the field and it was 3rd and 8, our DBs knew, like, hey, man, if we lock down this guy even for like a second, Jarvis is going to get that quarterback. You know what I mean? And it's just like it provides a security blanket, but also a confidence booster for the morale of the team, both in game, but also leading up during the week, because they're like, oh, we got our guy back, right? We got the dude that can carry us when we need to be carried, even if we don't need to be carried. So I just think that the fact that we're already talking about him potentially coming back, running full speed, and clearly the surgery went well. I bet you that's just kind of the buzz in the locker room was like, oh, we're still competing at a high level here without our guy. What are we going to be able to do when our guy comes back?
Yeah.
And I think that's huge. And you think about Oscar Dell. Think about the plays that he made, the one-handed catch against Florida, right? The ability for our offense to still function at a high level and perform at a high level with Oscar taking the bulk of the snaps. Now all of a sudden it's like we have two really dynamic guys at tight end when Brock comes back. The receivers obviously picked up some slack. I mean, there is sometimes a blessing in disguise with injuries if the team can handle that adversity well. And to me, it seems so far that the team has handled the adversity of Brock being out fairly well.
Yeah. And then look at the 2 games without Brock. You have Ladd, career high 6 catches, 135 and a touchdown versus Florida. And then last week, 7 catches, which is another career high. In the catch department, had 90 yards, I believe.
Man, he's a dude.
Yeah, dude, he stepped up hard, and Georgia's looking for them. I mean, that's almost double the receptions of other guys in that game, and then also the Florida game, right? So they're looking for him. They're going for him, and he's open, but he always open in Waffle House, right? You want to do a history class before we get into Ole Miss?
Let's do it. So,
all right, guys. History class with Artie Lynch. Well, Artie, let's set you up. If you're first time watching, Artie does a little history class each week, gives us some history lessons from college football in whatever time frame he chooses. It could be the 1880s. It could be yesterday. We don't know, but we're here for it, and we love college football, so that's why we do it.
Well, I like how you said 1880s, because the birthplace of college football is where the history lesson is going. Rutgers University, the birthplace of college football. True, they played Princeton in 1888, I think it was. First game against Princeton, the first ever like official college football game played in the United States. And Piscataway, I can't even say it, Piscataway, New Jersey. But you and I were it came to my mind because I was like, man, like I'm pretty sure like the pandemonium in Piscataway, like that call was like around this time, and you and I were texting on Saturday about the Ohio State Rutgers game, and Rutgers was like up at the time, at home. Rutgers is a better team. I love Greg Schiano. I know Tennessee fans, scared him out of the stadium or out of Knoxville a couple years ago, but we were watching that game and we were like, Ohio State doesn't look that good, but Rutgers looking a little frisky. And obviously they had a bad bounce on interception. Things turned, they ended up losing the game. But my mind started racing a little bit because I'm always one of those guys in college football that like I love when one of those kind of like the mid-major teams like James Madison right now is going on this 2-year run where like they've been undefeated for 2 years in a row, and they just got bumped up to 1A. I loved when Appalachian State beat Michigan, right? I love when like Illinois 2 years ago goes on a run, they're like 7-0 after they've been sucking for 10 years. I love that, right? Because it's just it's just kind of it's great for the sport, A, and B, it's just I know how those kind of runs can make things exciting for those local colleges and communities, right? BC had a run with Matt Ryan years ago, and they're like number 2 in the country. And like everyone in Massachusetts, for the first time since Doug Flutie, was talking about Boston college football. And as a college football fan, growing up in New England, no one ever talked about college football. I always had to, pretend like like I was part of something bigger than I was until I actually went to school. So I started thinking about that pandemonium Piscataway and when it was, and it was November 6th, 2006. Rutgers and Louisville had never played each other ranked in the history of their program. Louisville was number 3, and Rutgers was like 15 at the time. And this was like they had Ray Rice, Ryan Leonard, the McCourty twins for the Patriots, and Rutgers, Greg Schiano. They ended up beating Louisville. The fans went like roaring. The fans roared the field. Empire State Building was lit up in like scarlet and red. And I was just thinking about like last week, you and I were texting. First off, Ohio State not that good. Second off, we were just like, man, like this would be a huge win for them. And it just kind of got me like in the state of nostalgia, thinking about like these kind of different types of like northern schools, right? Like Rutgers, they don't have the same juice that Athens has, right? Or the same like passion that like an Ohio State fan base has. But when these schools get going and they kind of hit a streak of magic like they did in 2006 for Rutgers, it's just what makes college football great, right? And so this happened in the specific date exactly was November 6th in 2006, Rutgers and Louisville. The previous year, Rutgers was 1-8, Louisville was 2-7. But in this specific game, Louisville was number 3 in the nation. Rutgers was 15, and I'll never forget that call. Like there's pandemonium in Piscataway, and all of a sudden you see the 50,000 students in Rutgers storm the field. And there's a great podcast that I listened to with Greg Schiano interview. That guy Adam Brennerman interviewed him earlier this year, and they were talking about his transformation from taking over Rutgers and building them up. And part of the reason he left was because he was told by administrators that Rutgers would never join the Big Ten, and so he went down to the Buccaneers. And if you follow his career, Schiano, he kind of like bounced around. Tennessee said thanks, but no thanks. And he always had a goal, like he wanted to take Rutgers from the beginning and turn it into his kind of Penn State. And fortunately, he's back there. But I just thought that last week watching the Ohio State game, the first thing that came to mind was that pandemonium in Piscataway. And you and I were kind of talking about Greg Schiano and Rutgers.
Yeah.
And I just thought
recruiting story.
Oh, the recruiting story.
Yeah, what was his pitch?
So this game was in 2006, right? Obviously, it had an impact on me. I start getting recruited in 2006, and so I get a call. And if this is showing my age a little bit. In the high school I was at, they had like a landline phone in each classroom, and so when I started getting recruited, and no one from my high school really got recruited in the same type of way I did, which was very unique. And I used to get calls, right? Like usually that call is like if someone gets in trouble and the principal needs to see him, the teacher's like, hey, so-and-so, you need to go to the principal's office, or so-and-so, you need to go to their office. So I would just get consistent calls on the line during these classes, and it was college coaches. But usually it was like there's a coach in the guidance office, there's a coach in the gym that wants to see you or whatever. But sure enough, I'm in woodshop class. Mr. Butler, the woodshop teacher, gets the phone call, and he's like, and they're like, is Arthur there? And Mr. Butler's like, yeah, like we're in the middle of class. He's like, can we speak to him? And so I go over, take the phone call, and it's Greg Schiano. He phoned into my woodshop class, into the landline of the high school, and we just sat there and talked shop for about an hour, the remainder of class. And you could just see, like, we're talking about Rutgers football, right? At this time, I'm getting recruited by Florida, Georgia, Tennessee, Penn State. And out of all the schools I had talked to, I'm speaking in woodshop class for an hour with Greg Schiano, and I was like ready to commit on the spot because I was like, this guy, you're just kind of you're so there's just some people you meet, and I'm sure Kirby's a lot like this, right? John Lilly was a lot like this, who recruited me at Georgia. But you're just like, I don't know what he's even saying, but I'm buying in. And so I'll always forget that. I'll always have a soft spot for Greg Schiano. I'll always have a soft spot for Rutgers. And I was pulling for him last week because I do think when schools like that get to taste, they're never going to be the Georgia or the Alabamas, right? But if they can even just taste that kind of like sweet taste of success and that kind of glory of college football, it makes the sport that much better. So that's more of a personal anecdote than a history class, but November 2006, Pandemonium in Piscataway. There's a 30 for 30 in the Big Ten Network type documentary about it. It's awesome.
Yes, sir. I love it. I appreciate it, Artie. Another episode down of History Class with Artie Lynch. Let's get to the big one. So, Pat McAfee, I don't know if you like Pat McAfee. If you're listening to this, everybody has an opinion on the man. I think, I like his show. I like him. Is he good for game day? I'm not sure. Kind of mixed on the game day situation because it's always been a staple for me because it was really big in popularity when I started watching college football, and it obviously reached this level now. But they made some moves. A lot of Georgia fans didn't like to see David Pollock out. I am one of those. I think he knows ball. I think he adds a lot of, you have your Hurt Herbstreit doing his analytics thing and really providing some analysis to the game. You're kind of missing that without David there to me. So Pat McAfee will be filming there in Athens on Friday, his show, and then College Game Day will be there 9 a.m. to noon in Myers Quad. Night game, 7 p.m. kick in Athens. This Ole Miss team is good. All right. And Vegas likes them more than Missouri. And we had that tough game last week. So something to keep in mind. It's a 10.5 point spread right now. The total is 57.5, which is it's pretty big to me, that total there. Let's get into the numbers real quick and we'll give our first thoughts. So Ole Miss, third in the SEC in total offense, 297 passing, 181 rushing per game. Seventh in the SEC in total defense, giving up 228 passing and 137 on the ground. They get after the QB hard, right? And you saw Georgia give up 3 sacks to Missouri. They love the Rebels to get after the quarterback. They are going to blitz Carson Beck all game. That's how they're going to try to force turnovers, try to get Carson off the spot and force him into errant throws. Second in the SEC in sacks, behind A&M, and they're not far off. 4 players at least 3.5 sacks. All right. And countless others, obviously, and those away. Artie, this is interesting to me. Listen to this. So Ole Miss at home and Ole Miss on the road are 2 completely different teams by the numbers. Have you seen that? It looked like you have. Ole Miss is really half as good in almost every category too, which is really, really strange. I don't think we haven't seen, at least we haven't played a team like that this year when their numbers are so different. Their red zone touchdown rate and our third down conversion rate drops 30%, right? Rush yards game goes down to 122. 3 more interceptions on the road than they have at home. And then here's the big one. They got 15 passing touchdowns at home. They have 3 on the road.
That's pretty wild.
Isn't that weird? Now, they've played in some tough stadiums. And Kirby Smart said that yesterday. Like, they've played in some tough stadiums. And this year and last year. They got one of the tougher schedules. So, Sanford, that crowd, right? That's going to be a big factor.
I mean, JC, Saturday is going to be a shit show. Like,
yeah.
you know how many Georgia kids from Georgia go to Ole Miss, and this this game, Athens is going to be.
My cousin's one of them.
Anyway, I interrupted you, but yeah, this stadium's going to be insane.
No, you're not interrupting. I think that's it's something we need to talk about because for the reasons I just said, and that's beyond, I'm not saying that no other team has an issue coming in. They obviously do, right? They're going to make a difference. But I think Ole Miss shows us that they can be more vulnerable when they play on the road like this. And plus in this environment, when this game is really, we talked about last week, it was the biggest home game to that point. This is the biggest home game in Sanford.
100%.
Everybody's going to be there. If you didn't take your ticket for the last game, how students are, they give their tickets away and such. They're not giving it away for this game. If they are, they shouldn't be in the stands anyway.
No, I think this is probably the best opponent they'll play all year until the SEC championship game.
Yeah, no,
Thus
I
far.
definitely, yes, I definitely
Um,
think that. I think Tennessee's going to lose this week. We'll get into we'll get into that in a minute.
yeah, yeah.
No, I'm with you. I think crowd's going to make a difference. Something to keep in mind. They're not as efficient, and it's almost every category. Like I said, you can look at it. I don't want to bore y'all with 30 minutes of numbers, but difference maker here. Georgia, first in the country in third down conversions, fifth on third down defense. Ole Miss, 111th on third down offense and 85th on third down defense. This game gets close. Who can make the big plays on third down? Georgia's shown it can. Ole Miss has shown it can't, at least to this point. But anything can happen. You're right. I'm not going to say Georgia's going to come in and just whoop their tails. And last thing, I'll finish this and we'll give our thoughts here. Artie, weather. And I wrote a post on this. I literally wrote a post on this for USA Today like 3 hours ago. And it was basically all I was saying is the weather report. I literally like weather.com'd it, linked it. Hey, here's what they're saying, something to look out for, right? Call me Weatherman JC, I'll take it. Reddit, college football Reddit, quoted the link to the tweet of my post and said, Georgia fans already making excuses in case they get upset by Ole Miss, something like that.
People are insane.
Yeah, dude. They hate Georgia. We're the new Alabama.
We live in a world that is like upside down. I swear to God, it's just like. Anyway, that's another a different conversation for a different day. But
yeah, I mean that was. Hey, thanks for the plug, college football Reddit. I appreciate.
No doubt.
Give me some more views.
Yeah, click to subscribe.
Yeah, exactly. High. All right. Anyway, weather report. High of 55, low of 47, and if you're in Georgia, that's cold. Okay, we don't like that. But in football weather, that's not bad. We can do. I mean, that's nice. I mean, you're in pads, you're hot, you're running. It's cool. The thing that stands out, 70% chance of rain around kickoff, 30% in the morning. Probably have the tarp on the field. That's not going to hurt you, right? Supposed to stop in the afternoon and start back again in the evening. And, of course, being a night game, probably going to be some rain. Already take over how that affects, in your experience, the game at all. Anything you remember from those times playing in the rain?
We played Arizona State in 2009 at home. Brock Osweiler was the quarterback. Vontez Burfict was the middle linebacker freshman. I got a great story one day. We'll save it for a different time between Vontez Burfict and Joe Cox. I may have told you on a podcast before, but anyway.
I'm going to jot that down.
Yeah, please do. It's a great story. Joe Cox, also the tight ends coach currently for the Alabama Crimson Tide. Anyway, if it's torrential downpour, it throws a wrench in everything, because particularly on grass, which is what Sanford is, obviously. I don't think that's what you said that is going to be the forecast. I think you said it's going to be rain, right? Light rain. It's not.
Yeah. That's
this was like a monsoon. So, but when you're cold and wet, I think that favors a team like Georgia personally over Ole Miss. It certainly would favor us over a team like Missouri. But I think Ole Miss probably has a little bit better running game, although Missouri did run the ball well last week.
Yeah.
But it really, it's unless it's soaking wet, JC, I don't think that it affects the game that much. Okay. I will say this: if we're expecting a significant amount of rain, and typically every time around Georgia, Florida, because Florida weather is so unpredictable, Murray, and he could speak to this next time you speak with him. It's like we will dunk our footballs in buckets of water, like before each play. And so the quarterback can get used to holding a wet football. So the receivers like myself and the running backs can understand what the ball is going to feel like in a QB running back exchange, or, we're running a 5-yard out. It's like that ball gets a little heavy, right? Like your fingers adapt to catching, a football, and you're expecting it to weigh a certain amount. But if that thing is logged up with water, it does have an effect. Now, I say that to say this, like the ball, it's got to be really raining hard, right?
Yeah.
Like North Texas 2013, Arizona State 2009,
Georgia, the
Nebraska.
last one we're talking Georgia,
Yeah,
is really so Tennessee started raining in the second half last year. It did start pouring pretty good, right?
Texas A&M.
A&M. And then the other one, 2019, Georgia, Kentucky at
Yep.
Sanford. I was there at that one, and that was really raining. That was really
Yeah.
raining. Defensive battle, run the ball, run the clock, get out of there kind of game. I think, when you're considering how the players will play, I mean, Carson's got big hands. His arm strength is great. I don't think you're going to be affected there. But like you said, I think, receiver exchanges maybe, but it has to be raining enough. And like I said, it's just a forecast. Georgia's weather is unpredictable too. But that cold front looks like it is coming in because it's going to be that way Friday and Saturday and a little bit of Sunday. So that's going to bring that moisture, right? So
I'm not, the cold is never, I mean, it's not.
I'm not worried about the cold, just the rain.
No. The rain is something to consider if it's going to be raining fairly heavily.
Okay.
If not, if it's almost like a drizzle, like you almost actually prefer it because it keeps you cool a little bit. But man, if it's significantly wet, right, your whole game plan changes, right?
Yes, guys, I'm just noting this, but I will say if you're thinking about putting a little units, some fun dollars on the under here, I would say that's probably a good bet because what does Georgia do in these rainy games? They chew the clock to get out of there. You look at Tennessee last year. What was it, 24-13 garbage time touchdown by Tennessee? That total was high in that game. Georgia, Kentucky, when it was raining like that. Low scoring game. It was like 9 to something. I can't remember exactly. Mm-hmm. But something to consider if you want to take it. I like the under anyway. And we'll move on. So Ole Miss players-wise, Jackson Dart's playing really well right now.
Mm-hmm.
Fifth in the SEC in passing yards. Has 16 passing touchdowns on the season, 4 interceptions. But the thing to note here, 300 yards on the ground and 7 touchdowns on the ground. So when they get in their red zone, they get in short goal, they're going to go Quishon Judkins, who's a great power back, small, has that center of gravity. He's hard to tackle. Those guys, like a Dejon Edwards, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then Jackson Dart in the red zone, if they get close like that. Georgia's keen on that. Georgia sees this stuff, so I expect them to have something ready for Jackson Dart. But with his ability to rush and that gunslinger mentality he has, it's going to be hard to defend. You have to have that linebacker spine, right? And then you have Jamon Dumas-Johnson out. How does Georgia's defense respond to that? Who do they spy him with? That's what I'm going to be looking for in that first drive. And I think, we've seen so many first drive successes for opposing teams against Georgia this year. Lane Kiffin being the offensive guru he is, and really scheming well for teams. Ole Miss, that first drive, I would expect them to score, to be honest. That's a weird, you can play that too if you want, but I expect something like that to happen. But Georgia's they're just so good at really making adjustments from that point on. Artie, 10.5 points here. Top 10 matchup, CFP implications for especially Ole Miss, right? Georgia's still got some games. Got Tennessee, probably SEC championship. Ole Miss, this is really them to get their name up in there to have a chance and stay alive in the SEC, hoping for an Alabama just complete meltdown at the end of the season. How do you see this game shaping out? What's your feeling going into this one?
And again, I've said it before on this podcast. I'm a fan of Lane Kiffin. I think he's good for college football. I think he's hilarious, but he has been known to be outcoached against great college coaches, right? Not to say he's not a great college coach, but when he's played against Saban, and I don't necessarily know if he's actually coached against Kirby yet.
He has not.
But I put Kirby up there as an elite coach, obviously. And I think this is going to come down to are the team that's most prepared for this game and for whatever the elements may bring will ultimately win the game. I think obviously it's nice to be at home. I don't think that's like a deciding factor for the Dogs. I think ultimately if they are prepared the way they have been preparing for these other games, I like Georgia because of the weather, like you said, and the unpredictable. Is it going to rain? Is it not? I probably like Ole Miss to cover, but I could see. I think it's going to be like a 31-21 game, and it's not going to be particularly close. I think Ole Miss will probably get some garbage points at the end, but I think it's going to come down to coaching in this particular game,
Yeah.
right? I think Ole Miss has got plenty of talent. It's got plenty of firepower. Their defense is not as good as Georgia's, but statistically, there's probably only a couple of defenses that are statistically better than Georgia's. So it's like we know we're going to have that win in the matchup. I think special teams, Ole Miss is always pretty good at it. They always have some trick plays up their sleeve because that's kind of Lane Kiffin's MO.
Yeah.
So I just think it's going to come down to coaching. And I think Coach Bobo is going to have a great offensive plan. I think between Kirby Smart, Muschamp, and got a blank on his name to help me with the Coach DC.
Schumann, Glenn Schumann.
Schumann. Schumann, I think the defense will be ready to go. Well, coach. So I like Georgia. Take Georgia by 10. So I don't think they're gonna cover, but it's gonna be.
Yeah.
It'll probably be 30-13 going into like late in the fourth quarter, and Ole Miss will probably have a garbage time touchdown and make it 30-20 or 31-21.
Got you. So you see, basically, it sounds like last week's game from that standpoint. At least
Totally.
on the score, tough game. I agree with you. And a lot of your points.
Ole Miss is good, man. Ole Miss is good.
No, I guess I think the best team Georgia's played. I think they're glaring holes for them in run defense, and because they like to sack the quarterback so well, you have some options in there and play action and such. RPOs, right? You get them going upfield towards the QB and dunk underneath. Georgia's really good in the screen game, and Mike Bobo loves to throw those. I think you take advantage of that run defense. I think Georgia rushes really well. I like Dajon Edwards over 100 yards in this game. You have Kendall Milton healthy too to give you that physical presence too when you want to switch it up and throw Kendall back there and let him run over a couple guys. I think run game very key here for Georgia, especially if it rains, but even not. I think that's where Georgia has some advantage there and they take it. Third down, I think Georgia continues to be efficient there. Carson Beck's not going to hurt you like we've seen unless he has a complete meltdown. I don't think he will. I think he's gotten more confident with each week. He looks the part. He's poised. He has that arm talent, and he has Ladd McConkey. They are on the same page right now for sure. He knows where he's going to be, and Ladd's always there. He's so good at sitting down in the zone and finding that spot and give. And he's not a big guy either, and he gives Carson a great target to throw at. Oscar Delp played well last week. That's your boy. And Thomas, Dominic Lovett, those weapons, they take advantage because that is the whole. It's for Ole Miss. It's the defense. Offensively, I like what you said about coaching here because and Georgia talks about it. Kirby Smart talks about it during the bye week. They're not necessarily preparing for Florida each week. That first week, the bye, they're preparing for future opponents. So they've got to look at Ole Miss before this game, right? And their coaches, they have analysts. They're scheming. What do they do well? What could we do possibly in the next few weeks when we see them to really hold Lane Kiffin, Jackson Dart, Quayshawn Judkins, which is an awesome name, kind of hold those guys at bay, right? And I that's why I think Georgia wins. That defensive presence, the field goals, the run game. I like them this week. I'm gonna say 32-17. I think they keep Ole Miss under 20, and I also like the under a lot. Under 57.5. That's for me. It's a 49-point total. So maybe think about that under. We'll see what the weather does, of course, in the next couple of days if that changes at all. That's good, man. I like it. So Georgia gets the win in Athens. They move to 10-0 on the season, 6-0 in the SEC, 7-0 in the SEC. So many numbers. And then you have a matchup with Tennessee next week. And that moves us into games to watch, and we'll get out of here, y'all. Just a few games we want to watch, and if Georgia fans should definitely be watching here, sitting at number 2 in the CFP rankings. We'll start with that one I just mentioned. Tennessee is a 1-point favorite at Missouri. I like Missouri, and I know Luther Burden being out of that game is big for this matchup. They also have a couple more injuries. Linebackers out, and he was out against Georgia though. But he's out, and then a defensive tackle, who I'm forgetting his name right now. But Luther Burden, that is a big part of this game, I think. But I think they have enough players. They showed enough, at least against us, even without him in that game, to prove to me that they are, especially at home in Columbia where Georgia struggled and a lot of teams do struggle. I just think they're a better team than Tennessee. And I've covered some of Tennessee stuff for the Players Lounge just this year. Provide some analysis on that. And Tennessee has such a struggle in the second half. One, penalties. They're one of the most penalized teams in the country. Going into a road environment. Pass offense is just not threatening, right? Their defensive front, that's where they've excelled. But so did Georgia, and Missouri ran for 150. I think they control that game and they win. Maybe a couple points, field goal, something like that. Another one here, Alabama, 11-point favorite at Kentucky. That's at noon. Michigan, 4.5-point favorite at Penn State at noon. I don't know what happens in that game, man. I don't like either team. I guess Michigan's better just because they have a better quarterback. I'm not really sure. I think Penn State's offense is abysmal. Get your thoughts on that. Miami at Florida State. Florida State 14-point favorites, 3:30 kick. Miami's a tough team, man. That's going to be a good game. I think that's a sneaky good game, sneaky close game, and FSU's playing some close ones. And that's a battle in the Florida, right? It's about a Florida battle. Utah at Washington.
At one point, that was one of the best rivalries in sports.
Yeah.
When Mark Richt was the offensive coordinator at Florida State, Bobby Bowden was humming, and man, talk about history class. There's some great ones.
Yes,
great games from those two. Yeah,
all documentaries out there. I've seen all those. That's where I've lived through that. Utah at Washington, 9.5-point favorites. The Huskies are, and that's a 3:30 kick too. Utah's a tough team. They've upset so many Pac teams in the past. That might be a close one as well. Washington.
So
this is horrible. Yes.
I got 3 top 10 teams losing this week.
Oh.
Washington, Ole Miss, and Penn State.
Penn State's number 10, ain't they?
You got number 10.
That does count.
So, and I wouldn't. I'm not betting it. So, but I wouldn't be surprised if someone took the bet Miami money line. I wouldn't call them crazy.
Yeah, I wouldn't either. I think it's be close. Yeah. I might take Miami, to be honest. They're inconsistent, but
keep going. Yeah, I was just 3 top 10 teams going down. I think the one that's surprising people is going to be, I think, Washington.
Yeah, no,
goes down this week.
It's that defense, man. It's that defense. Artie, it's been a great show, man. I think we'll end it there.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So Georgia, 7 p.m. versus Ole Miss, number 2 versus number 9 in Sanford Stadium. Be in Athens that week. Tune in. We'll have a little stand-up interview with Keith Marshall, former Georgia running back, Players Lounge CEO. Actually got invited to the White House to talk about NIL stuff. I saw
That's
today.
Pretty cool.
So yeah, shout out Keith. So that video will be coming out maybe Sunday, Monday. A little stand-up in Athens. Hopefully it's not raining all over my stuff. But Artie, as always, man, I really appreciate having you on. Artie has, yes, sir. Artie has Georgia winning, but not covering. I have Georgia covering and the under hitting. Till next week, hopefully we'll see the 10-0 Georgia Bulldogs when we come back and jump back on, Artie. Go Dogs.
All right, go Dogs. Sorry, something came on there if you could hear that.